Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today I want to talk to you about how to make your Jeep ride great. The example I'm using is my 2006 LJ, long wheelbase TJ, but really this is going to apply to a wide range of Wranglers, Cherokees, Grand Cherokees. We're going to talk about control arm length and angles, shocks and shock valving, coil springs and spring rates, track bars, and more. So stay with us. I managed to fit 37-inch Nitto Trail Grapplers on my Jeep with only 2.5 inches of lift. Now I'm not running a lift kit. I've got a bunch of custom components that I've chose we'll go into more detail about, but the Nittos are really my secret to success on the trail. They fit due to the AEV Highline Fenders. This is a kit unfortunately AEV doesn't make anymore, but Jeep themselves have borrowed these cues. A JL has way bigger fender openings than a TJ did, and a TJ has way bigger fender openings than a YJ did. That's all good news for you if you have a newer Jeep. This video is actually brought to you by Nitto. They make not only the Trail Grappler, they've got Recon Grapplers, Ridge Grapplers, Terra Grapplers, you name it, they have a tire for you. Check them out at nittotire.com. When I bought this Jeep from my friend Jeremy, it already had the Highline fenders on it, and it had a lift kit on it with really high-end King shocks. So I was surprised when it rode like garbage. So the first thing I did was I went to my friend Sam Cawthorn at Samco Fabrication, and he revalved the shocks for me. So he actually put in a flutter stack. What that means is you have a shock piston that oil flows through, and it has shims, kind of if you think of a leaf spring, how the metal bends, that's what a shock shim does. And what Sam did was he took the smallest one and he put it right next to the biggest one. And what that does is just sort of eases up that flow over little bumps, and it made it ride way better. Now the downside of a flutter stack, not everyone uses them, because the bad part of that is that first shim will fatigue more, it can move more, and so you risk cracking it. And that's something when you rebuild the shocks, you might have to do more often with the flutter stack. So keep that in mind. One issue that you run into with a Jeep if you've got a low lift height but a lot of articulation is that the coil will actually come out of the bucket because it's not long enough to fully allow the suspension to droop. I'm running 2.5-inch lift dual rate coils from Skyjacker, and those actually, the first rate is basically bound. The coil springs, as you can see, are right next to each other, but then when the suspension droops, those move apart and it keeps the coil from coming out of the bucket. They also ride really great. I like the spring rate, fairly soft, which works nice on the trail at soaking up those small bumps. My Jeep has a short arm suspension on it, and with TJs, the arms are real short. So if you have a JK or a JL, they're actually 50% longer than a short arm on a TJ. They're comparable in length to a long arm kit. And what that does is the longer the arm, if we think of our trigonometry here, there's a length between where the arm mounts on the frame and the axle. The greater that length is, the shallower the angle is for a given lift height. So why you want that shallow angle is there's less caster change as the suspension cycles, there's less pinion angle change. All of that results in better handling both on the street and on the trail. The way I'm able to get away with a short arm lift is because I'm only running a 2.5-inch lift height, so the arms don't get too steep. I've done a few other little tricks. Nth Degree Mobility is a company that used to make TJ suspensions. Fun fact, Jim Friends, the founder of Nth Degree Mobility, was a Jeep engineer in their suspension division. He went on to work with AEV. He designs all of their lift kits, so you know he's a smart guy. What he did was he moved actually the frame mount down on the control arm, the lower control arms. I stole that from him. I did it myself with my friend Brad Davidson, but we did the same thing. We were able, there's enough meat on those control arm brackets, we were able to lower the arms about 1 inch, and that was a 5-degree less angle with these arms. So I'm running JKS control arms, JKS track bars, JKS everything. I really like them. They're heavy duty, they're adjustable, which lets you dial in your wheelbase to center your tire in the wheel well, your pinion angle in the front and the rear, your caster angle in the front, and they're super heavy duty. The stock arms use bushings on each end. They're just stamped steel, and they're pretty flimsy and weak. These are tubular steel, so they're much stronger. They use a flex joint on one end, which is similar to like a rod end, but where a rod end is just metal on metal. A flex joint uses a urethane bushing. They're rebuildable, they cushion some of the load a little better. And then these actually have a bushing on the other end, which really helps to reduce road noise and vibrations and things like that. I couldn't be happier with them. I think they work great. Another part that I have from JKS Manufacturing is their adjustable coilover spacer with an integrated air bump. So what this does is allow you to fine tune your lift height. I actually removed that part. I didn't want any additional height. I wanted to keep this Jeep low, but it does use an air bump instead of the normal bump stop. And what an air bump is, or a hydraulic bump stop, is when your suspension is at full compression, this really relieves that last inch or inch and a half of suspension travel and smooths it out so you don't have that harsh engagement when you hit the bump stops. Now, I don't use this Jeep to go super fast, to be quite honest. They're not cheap for these adjustable coilover spacers with the air bumps. It's probably the last part I would get, not the first part out of the list that I have on this Jeep. So actually the last part that I've added is E-Clik shock reservoirs from SDI. So if you have a JK or a JL or a JT, you can just buy shocks from SDI with this E-Clik technology. They're actually working with Carly now, so if you have a Super Duty, you can get it. And what it does is, it's similar to some other systems out there, active suspension, like you would find on a Ram TRX, you would find on a new Raptor. And what that does is, the compression is adjustable on the fly. But SDI is doing it through the aftermarket. They have a universal kit now that allows you to put their reservoirs onto any shock that has external reservoirs. So if you have a bypass shock, for instance, with a piggyback reservoir, you can't use this. But if you have a hose to an external reservoir, like I had on all 4 King shocks on this truck, then you can use these, because that's how they're metering that oil flow, is through the reservoir. So they include an ECU, which is the same one used in heavy equipment. They're super robust, super reliable. And then they actually have an IMU, an inertial measurement unit, measures pitch, roll, yaw, all of these different things. And that adjusts these shocks 250 times a second. In my particular case, this Jeep worked really good on the trail. It's nice and soft and compliant, but it's a little too soft on the street. Adding these E-Clik reservoirs allowed me to firm it up on the street, and it got rid of, like, the brake dive used to be real bad, the sway was bad, and now they're way better since I've added these. So I've heard this actually compared to a Nest thermostat. This is input and control that we have for the SDI E-Clik system. It mounted really nice in my Jeep right here, next to the locker controls, under the HVAC controls. If you have like a JK or a JL, they actually replaced the shift lever for the transfer case with this system, and it's even more integrated. But if we go to the bottom here, it'll take us to the home screen, and we've got these different things, you know, your brightness, load compensation, which is pretty nice if you're towing. I don't do a lot of towing with this Jeep, so I usually just leave it down. Swipe down to go back. Go through different settings here. This will take us back to this menu. This is how I usually leave it. It shows you how stiff the shocks are, from 0 being softest to 10 being stiffest in real time. So when you're cornering or you're braking, you can actually see those changes. Kind of nerd out on that. If we go through, there's modes you can select. So you've got street mode, that's what I'm in now, trail mode, desert mode. Typically street is going to be stiffer, desert even stiffer yet, so you don't bottom out the suspension, and then trail mode is softer. Then you can go in here to the Pro menu. That allows you to make all sorts of different changes. So you can adjust the pitch sensitivity when you're going down an obstacle or an up an obstacle, your roll sensitivity, so I have that turned all the way up, which has helped with cornering. Your turning sensitivity, it'll actually stiffen the outside shocks and soften the inside shocks when you're making a turn. Throttle sensitivity, this thing doesn't have enough horsepower that's a big deal, but if you have something with a lot of power, it'll keep the rear from squatting. Brake sensitivity, that helps with the brake dive in addition to the pitch sensitivity, and we're back at the beginning. You can also go in and just select the front or rear. So we went off-road, I just cranked the front all the way down for comfort and the rear all the way down. You get on the street, you can crank those up. There is fine tuning here, but I've been making pretty big changes I just got this system and I'm getting used to it and sort of fine-tuning all the different parameters, but it really does make a difference. I was wondering how big of a difference it would make just using the universal kit with the reservoirs, but I've been really impressed. I think it's made the Jeep a lot more drivable on the road, a lot less brake dive, a lot less body roll, which is exactly what I was looking for. If you do have a JK, JL, JT Wrangler, you can actually get their system, and in addition to using the IMU, it actually plugs into the ECU, so it knows what your steering angle is, how much you're hitting the accelerator or the brakes, and it uses that information as well to make changes to your shocks on the fly. It works really well. I've been blown away. On my Jeep, I added WJ knuckles. This is a pretty common conversion. The WJ passenger side knuckle has a separate boss for the tie rod and the drag link. Stock on a TJ, the drag link comes down and actually goes to the knuckle, and then the tie rod connects into that. It's not particularly strong. I don't love them, but what this does is actually relieves that drag link angle, which when you match the track bar angle, results in less bump steer. So taking a cue from my tracker, when Jesse Haynes built it, it had air shocks, it had 3 links with track bars, and I thought, oh, I'm definitely gonna need sway bars. And Jesse told me, why don't you just drive it and you can tell me if it needs sway bars. Well, it didn't. The thing handled great on the street and on the trail. It was super stable. And the secret was the track bar, much like a moon buggy, it actually was higher at the axle end than the frame end. So the roll center was super high, which makes them really stable. I tried to replicate that with my Jeep. If you see lifted, say, 4Runners or Wranglers, and you drive behind them and you see this track bar and it looks like this, that is not great. It doesn't provide very good handling. So I wanted to get those track bars really flat. And going back to the steering, that drag link angle has to match the track bar angle in the front. You want them traveling in the same arc. Otherwise, as the track bar moves the suspension, if the drag link isn't matching, it'll input through the steering wheel and feed back, and it actually turns without you turning the wheel. That you definitely want to avoid. This has no bump steer at all. The drag link's flat, the track bar's flat, and the track bar's the same length as the drag link also. That's really important to make them travel in the same arc. So in order to accomplish that, I made it similar to a JK. Stock, the TJ has a pretty short track bar, and it mounts inside the frame on the steering box side, the driver's side, with like a tie rod end. Not great. They use these on Dodge trucks also. Using a bushing is way better. It's just stronger. It doesn't wear out as much. It has more movement. So I used a bushing on the frame end, and I moved the mount outside of the frame. So similar to a JK, I've got a mount from Barnes that is longer and it's outside the frame and allowed me to get that track bar much longer. Now the bad side about that is with the packaging is where the sway bar would live. So I don't have a front sway bar anymore, and that would normally be a big issue on a TJ, but with the flat track bars and particularly the addition of the E-Clik shock reservoirs now, it's really a non-issue. This Jeep goes down the road great, it works wonderfully on the trail, and I couldn't be happier. Would it be easier to just buy a lift kit? Yes, it would. But would it ride this good? I don't think so. I hand selected every item on this Jeep, and I'll be honest, sometimes it took me 2 or 3 tries to get it right, but now I think I have the winning formula. Agree? Disagree? Comment below and let me know what you think and what my next upgrade should be. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.